It has been said that ideas have consequences. That is so true, as we'll see in this program. We're being told today that life is just the product of time and chance and random forces. Well, if we've just evolved from the primeval slime, then humanity sinks in significance. Darwin's second major book was rightly titled The Descent of Man, where man was no longer viewed as a little lower than the angels, but rather a little higher than the apes.
What Darwin theorized about biology was applied by later thinkers to society, economics, and government, with devastating consequences.
There is a full-throated campaign to destroy human beings as being on the pedestal of uniqueness. There is a full-throated, ideological, and viscerally, emotionally intense desire to turn us into just another animal in the forest. The idea behind that is if we see ourselves as just part of nature, then we will be more gentle on the land and we will treat animals more humanely and so forth. I suggest that's folly. If we see ourselves as just another animal in the forest, that's precisely how we'll act.
See, the problem is they've accepted certain explanations of the facts that we observed as if they were observations themselves. Like they're saying, well, we've observed millions of years. Well, no, you haven't.
Yeah.
You're observing facts and interpreting them that way, right?
And there are two types of science, and we've talked about this many, many times. There's operational science, and that has to do with making direct observations and things. You can observe things happening in the present, see the results in real time. And then there's historical science, and that's about things in the past.
Right.
And where people make guesses about what happened in the past to explain what they're observing today.
Right.
Those are two different distinctions that really need to be made.
Do you understand the difference now? I mean, if I said, you know, figure out what chemicals are in this solution of water, what type of science would we use? Operational or historical?
Got to be operational.
Right, because I can do the experiment in the present, I can observe the results in real time.
Yeah, and you discover that it's Coke, not water.
You got to stay awake somehow.
So, okay. What about if we said, how did the peacock get its feathers?
Well,
operational or historical?
That'd obviously be historical.
Yes, historical.
I wasn't there
when
peacocks came into being.
Evolved? Was it created? We don't know. And said,
That's right.
Okay.
If I said, well, how old is this dinosaur bone? Well, you're looking at the bone. It's in your hand.
Okay, so you've got the facts.
Yes, I'm looking at
You've
a
got
fact.
the fact. You could be an evolutionist or a creationist, doesn't matter. You're
There's
holding a dinosaur.
There's a bone here.
There's a bone. Look at that bone.
Yeah.
So
how old is it?
how old is it?
It's
historical science.
That's right.
Right? It's not. Hopefully, this is not difficult as we go through this.
Yeah.
It seems tremendously difficult for evolutionists.
Sometimes you're talking to people, they just
no. It's about science, and we're on about science, and we're gonna go where the facts take us. Well, slow down there. We think of some other ones. How long ago did Neanderthals exist? Operational or historical? Operational or historical to determine the answer to that? It's historical.
Historical. If I said, well, how far away is the moon? Well, that's operational.
That's operational. You go and measure it.
Well, we've actually flown there.
Lasers? We've flown there, yeah.
That's right.
Your odometer doesn't work so well. But
you know.
What did amphibians evolve from? Operational or historical?
Well, obviously, you're assuming the history of evolution, even in the question.
Even in the question.
You've already assumed the answer, because you know, in a sense. How are computers made? When did God create the universe? How fast is a bullet from a .38 special travel? You know, just think about those things when you're being taught about this subject. It's very, very important. It's critical. There are two ways about it.
There are.
There is a difference between operational and historical science, and we need to understand that when we're thinking about these things. We'll see you next time.
Darwinism is science insofar as it is used at the level at which it really works empirically, and that's the micro level. Darwinism is a scientific explanation for why you get offshore island species that differ somewhat from species on the mainland. And there it's a fruitful research program, it's plausible, it's up to a point can be demonstrated, although even there only up to a point, I'm afraid, but it's legitimate good science. Now, Darwinism becomes philosophy when you make the extrapolation and say that's how we get things in the first place. The great example of that would be that there was a scientific hypothesis that in periods where the trees of a forest were darkened by industrial smoke, moths which were dark in color would be better able to survive because the birds wouldn't be able to see them. And light-colored moths would be eaten more often, and so for a time you would get more dark moths and fewer light moths in a population. And some observations were done which seemed to confirm this. Now that's perfectly good science, and it explains why when you have a population of light moths and dark moths both present in the population, you'll get more light moths at one time and more dark moths at another. Darwinism's perfectly good for explaining things like that. But when you take that evidence and you say, and that tells us how we got trees and moths and birds and scientific observers in the first place, that's pure philosophy. The amount of science in it is negligible. And of course, that's what's important about Darwinism. Nobody really cares all that much why you have more light and dark moths other than people whose professional mission is to study that. What the population wants to know is, how did we get here? And when the Darwinists try to answer that, it's pure philosophy.
I was prompted at that point to give a lecture on the origin of life, giving creation its due with as much mockery as I could summon. Truly, in the beginning was the Word, but the Word was hydrogen.
After that class, one of his graduate students came up to him and said,
"Great lecture, Doc." Well, that got my attention. Flattery always did. And she said, "But I have some questions." And indeed she did. She had a legal pad, and I could see line after line after line after line.
So they had an appointment, which ended up lasting longer than anticipated. The appointment also ended up changing Dr. Lumsden's life.
Now, I'm not trying to challenge anything, I just want to get my science straight.
That's fair enough.
Okay.
That's fair enough.
Last month you taught how mutations were genetic disasters. How by natural selection can they randomly produce new and better structures?
That's a good question. Good question. I'll probably have to think more about that.
Okay, well, aren't the odds of the random assembly of genes mathematically impossible?
You've had your share of mathematics. Let's see if we can't figure that out. Not only were we talking about a mathematical impossibility, we were talking about a physical and chemical impossibility, which gave me pause. Genes, that might be 10 to the 200th, 10 to the... Those are pretty formidable odds, aren't they? Mm-hmm. But the fact remains is that we're here. And in reality, the only way we could have gotten here is through the evolutionary process. So the fact that we're here really proves evolution, doesn't it? I could buffalo a student when I felt myself getting a little bit in trouble, okay? I'd had a few years' experience at this, okay? It's a trade secret. But for the first time maybe in my life, in explaining various facets of evolution theory, I began to listen to what I was saying. And what I was saying wasn't making very good scientific sense.
Where exactly in the fossil record is the evidence for progressive evolution, the transitional forms between the major groups?
You know, most of them, come to think of it, are fully formed kinds in their own right. This conversation with the young lady went on for approximately 3 hours, during which time, again, we entertained these questions, and the whole time I'm answering, I'm listening to my own responses and trying not to betray this to the student. I was rapidly concluding that this is not making good scientific sense. What I'm telling this young lady and what I told the students this morning is not good science. So far, I guess we just haven't been lucky enough to pick up the critical evidence. It dawned on me right then and there that evolution was bankrupt as a scientific theory. Well, if that were so, if life did not originate by a naturalistic, materialistic, spontaneous process, what was the alternative explanation? Oh my God. And I said it then, not in blasphemy, but in awe.